as a secular state has been described as simplistic, as increasingly religion in the country becomes politicised and politics influenced by religion. Does the honourable member agree that this is something that we see across many parts of the world? In many respects, separation of church and state is incredibly difficult to achieve in practice.
Thank you, Ms Noakes. I think in terms of what the honourable member's just said, she's right. There is, in many cases, through society or through formal political power or state structures, an enforcement going on of religious belief, particularly, I would say, in the northern parts of Nigeria, where some of the states I'll come on to in a minute still actually have the death penalty for blasphemy, as was touched on in one or two of the interventions as well. So whilst the theory is Secretary of State, where freedom of religion is guaranteed, I think as being touched on, and we'll touch on in a moment, the evidence is that that is not the reality that people actually living in Nigeria feel or experience. So given Parliament is returning this week after its Easter recess, it's apt to reflect on the situation for Christians. Now, as touched on already, Nigeria is 7th on the Open Doors 2022 World Watch List of the 50 countries where it's most difficult to live as a Christian. However, if the World Watch List only measured violence, Nigeria would be at the top. According to Open Doors research, the majority of Christians killed for their faith around the world are killed in Nigeria, 79% of the global total. Most violence in Nigeria against civilians, especially Christians, occurs in the north, including the Middle Belt, and it's perpetrated by a range of groups, including Boko Haram, the Islamic State in West Africa Promise, Fulani militants, and armed bandits. As a result of the violence, Christians are being dispossessed of their land and means of earning a living, many ending up as internally displaced people. Although all civilians are subject to violence and threat, Christians are often specifically targeted because of their faith. If Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa Province, for example, want to eliminate the presence of Christianity in Nigeria, not demean or persecute, eliminate, with all the dark echoes of history that brings. This means men and boys are often specifically targeted by extremist groups with the aim of destroying livelihoods and stifling Christian population growth. Christian women and girls in northern Nigeria and increasingly further south are vulnerable to persecution for their faith and gender, for example, being targeted for abduction, sexual assault and forced marriage by armed groups. In northern states that operate under Sharia, Islamic law, Christians can be treated as second-class citizens, whilst Christians who convert from Islam are also at risk of pressure and persecution. Christians from a Muslim background also face rejection from their own families, pressure to give up their faith, and all too often physical violence. Now, Ms. Noakes, a debate like this it's not just about reflecting on those who share my Christian faith, as those who do not have a religious faith are, as mentioned already, effectively a religious minority in Nigeria.